Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Transformers: The Last Knight. I don't think you could ever say a Transformers movie is good, or at least a Michael Bay Transformers movie is ever good, considering the films themselves. I know some people like the first one. I have never liked any of these movies. I've seen all of them because I hate myself and because I'm like, they're big hits. I should always see the biggest films just so I see what the viewing public is into, which is a terrible idea when it comes to these movies. Most of the time I really dread these films because they're long, they're terrible, they don't really make a lot of sense, they're hard to even understand, like bizarre, strange art movies, but without like the meaning and the art and the strangeness. Well, I guess the strangeness is there. I guess that's always there. But this was probably one of the better of the Transformers movies. Not saying that I would see it again or recommend it or think this justifies having this many bad Transformers movies, but they at least tried to have a little more fun. They at least tried to do something different. They at least tried to do a plot structure that worked a lot better. They at least had actors who sort of kind of gave a fuck for once, which was kind of like mystifying in itself. And it is sort of really hard to even review these movies because you do feel like you're kind of repeating yourself over and over again. But I think there are enough different kind of interesting kind of things in this that make it a little more enjoyable than you'd ever think they would, and almost feels like attempts to change this franchise in ways that it's been stuck both with Michael Bay and stuck frankly existing for this long. I don't really know what this movie's about, but it's basically like, it's hard to describe what happens in this movie, but it's like, so Mark Wahlberg, whose name is Cade Yeager, which is like his name in these movies, he is in a junkyard with the Transformers who are outlawed despite, I think, saving the world, but they're outlawed and only in Cuba because the Hollywood movies are really into shooting in Cuba right now, as like Fate of the Furious did, because apparently Cuba in this universe is cool with the Transformers, but that's a whole thing, which by the way, that doesn't come into play. They just sent John Turturro and the Transformers, obviously, to Cuba to shoot scenes there, which has nothing to do with anything. I shouldn't even mention it. I could cut this part out of the review, but I won't, because let's just bring that part up. Who cares? Because that's kind of what this movie was like. In terms of the writing, it was kind of like, I don't know, who cares? Let's just make a 2.5-hour movie with robots that transform, except they don't that much in this movie, and there's explosions, and people will be cool with it. But yeah, so we find out that the Transformers have always been around forever, and it started with Merlin, who's played amazingly, by the way, by a very drunk Stanley Tucci. Right there, I was like, okay, you've won me over. Stanley Tucci playing a drunk Merlin, let's go. I could see this whole movie. And in the middle of like a battle between King Arthur and the Saxons, which involves lots of fireballs and like almost the cliche of like, how would Michael Bay handle a medieval battle with like fireballs and explosions, because like he's Michael Bay and of course he has to do that, which is like downright hilarious. Like he was just like, I'm fucking going for it, I don't give a shit, I'm just gonna have explosions. This is Transformers 5. Clearly you guys have let this go on way too long, but I don't care, I'm Michael Bay. Which is, I think the beginning part of this is everybody's just like, we don't care, whatever. And in that beginning part, that's a lot of fun. The rest of the movie has that same spirit and it's awful. But then, yeah, so you find out basically that Merlin's staff and all his magic powers were from the Transformers, because why not? And because that's like sort of a franchise thing with this franchise, is revisionist Transformer history. And so we find out the Transformers, I'm just kind of skipping around, but like, who gives a shit? Maybe my plot description will be better than the movie's plot for once. That's never happened before, but it's Transformers 5. So basically you find out there's this world order that started with King Arthur of the Knights of Transformers or something, and they were always helping everyone from like Shakespeare to Winston Churchill to Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. How they helped, I don't know. It doesn't seem like they transformed into stuff back then, so I don't really understand. They're just big robots, but if that was the case, like, wouldn't people remember that anyway? So they did all this stuff, and apparently Shia LaBeouf is in this order, and they show a picture of all the people, and it's a picture of Shia just going, boo? Everyone presumes he's dead, but I feel like it's just like he's just not involved. I feel like Shia's gonna come back. What's Shia doing? Come on, he should come back at some point. But I did like a picture of him going, boo? Like he was like, I don't know, guy. It was a mistake. I was famous. I was just supposed to be the Even Stevens kid. It was Spielberg's fault. So Mark Wahlberg is basically living in a junkyard with Gerard Carmichael, who I lost a bit of respect for when realizing he was in this movie, and not having any of his trademark timing or anything, so it was also super weird. But I guess he's the TJ Miller in this movie. So they're hiding out from the US government because the US government hates them for saving the world or something, or being in China, I don't know. So then the US government gets the Decepticons in a sequence which is actually pretty good, where they like talk with Megatron and negotiate getting Decepticons out of Transformer jail, which they should have gone into more, but they don't. And so then they have to go and get this thing because the US government wants this talisman that Kate Yeager has because it will unlock this giant weapon maybe, and then they follow him, and then Optimus Prime's bad is like bad guy Optimus Prime or something, and then but he fights Bumblebee, gets his voice back. I'm trying to think. Oh, Anthony Hopkins is in it. He has a C-3PO robot. There's a girl who looks like Megan Fox but isn't Megan Fox, but like English. She's like English Megan Fox, so I think she spells Megan with an H, probably. And so they go to England, and Stonehenge is involved, and then they fight, and Optimus is good again, and I think that's everything. So basically, the thing that makes these movies special is they make a lot of money. That's it. Nobody, artistically, they represent nothing. They represent helping Michael Bay's career out when it was kind of not doing incredibly well. And so now we're stuck with him. It's kind of like what happened with Zack Snyder, except before and probably way longer. It's nice that audiences have rejected this movie to a certain degree. It still made a lot of money. I notice people are like, oh, people see it ironically because they laugh at it. I see that a lot with this movie, and I'm like, first off, fuck all of you, because you have made these movies successful. You made this franchise happen. You're the reason all of us have to watch these fucking things. And then you're telling me you don't like them now and you're going to make fun of them. It's the 5th movie. This isn't the studio's fault. I mean, it's Michael Bay's fault, partly, that he made them. And Spielberg, that he is involved somehow. I'm not exactly sure about that one. I mean, he's an executive producer, but whatever. But point being is, I really blame the audience for this, because these movies are awful, and they've always been awful, and they'll always be awful, even though this one tries. And I think Mark Wahlberg actually like gives a shit for a lot of this. I think people forget Mark Wahlberg before he became Mark Wahlberg the movie star. He like did, you know, like David O. Russell movies before David O. Russell rebooted with Silver Linings Playbook and all that, and would do indie movies and would do stuff just that was an interesting role. That Mark Wahlberg is clearly gone at this point, but he always would try, and I think that energy is actually in this movie. Not as he's not a good performance, but he at least gives a shit. And same with Anthony Hopkins. He seems like he's having fun, and there's certain actors in this film that I think actually like sort of cared, like Josh Duhamel showed up. That was cool. Also, I think a better plot than the original, which was like with this whole thing with his daughter and her like old boyfriend who like knew about the Romeo and Juliet law and stuff like that was strange. And in this, it's like, oh, there's a romance. We're going back to the Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, Rose Huntington Whiteley thing that we had before. And it's like, yeah, that works a little better, but they kind of drop it and bring it back up and all this stuff. Mark Wahlberg becomes King Arthur or something. It's like, I think Michael Bay's biggest problem is like there's certain shots where you're like, wow, he is really talented, and then they go back to like the nonsense of like watching a Transformer go by and seeing all these gears move, and you're like, what is this? Like, what am I? It kind of made me feel like I was watching an edited version, and it's 2.5 hours. Like, it felt like they cut out certain things. Sometimes it felt like we were suddenly in places and they weren't explaining it very well, but the camera was always moving. That's a Michael Bay thing I've noticed. He's like, if we keep the camera moving, you'll feel like things are happening. And it's odd because I feel like I'm just like spinning around and like being shown all this beautiful, amazing stuff, but I'm not being told very much of anything, and the storytelling is never very competent. In this, I feel like they kind of try to, but it's so batshit crazy that like like the whole idea that the Transformers have been throughout all of history and have done all these amazing things. And it kind of reminded me of a Doctor Who episode I saw recently with the monks and how they like hypnotized the whole world and all this stuff, and they were throughout all history. Did the Transformers do that? Am I reading too much into this? It's like such a weird... Oh, and then like a character is suddenly French now, and he's stuck that way, and he does sound a lot like Pepe Le Pew. There's so many things in this movie. It's just like beyond, like, I know there's people who've literally just listed things that happened in this movie as their review, because you really could, because they're just like, this is probably the one Transformers movie that has so many batshit crazy, nonsensical, crazy things happen in it that you could have a little more fun with this one as just an example of like, wow, we as a society let this get to this. I mean, this is like the nexus of like, man, maybe Blockbuster has gone too far, that we're getting to a movie where the Transformers helped make the Underground Railroad and still like let slavery go on for a long time, because they're like big robot Transformers, and you'd think that they would, you know, somehow have stopped slavery. They did fight in World War II, unlike the Minions, who presumably did help slavery happen, which they don't go into that in the Minions, but that's a whole side thing. This one's probably the weirdest one, but it's also the one you kind of have to admire for just like, I don't give a shit, we're just gonna have the Transformers, they were always here, and they always had like weird things like that. Like the reason we really went to the moon was to get alien artifacts, the reason the pyramids exist is this thing and all that crap. And this is like, oh, we're just gonna go full into this. The reason everything happened is because robots that turned into cars came to Earth way before there were cars for some reason, which is like, what? And then to find out that Earth is Unicron, which I guess is gonna become a thing. Is Earth gonna like start eating other planets? But like all the planets in the solar system here are kind of uninhabited, so it'd be sort of a bummer, but it wouldn't be like that bad, depending on how you feel about Mars. I mean, it's like, or like Pluto, or I'm sure Unicron would be fine in our galaxy. I would like him to stay in the same orbit thing, because that would probably kill all of us if he moved. So he could just eat the moon, or would that like fuck up something? I don't know. And what's weird is like Optimus Prime is barely in it. The girl who's advertised in this is barely in it. They have a scene with like a bunch of kids at the beginning which never comes back. They bring up things and then they don't happen, and I'm not sure if it was like recut or they just like started writing a different movie and then got bored of that movie, or they took a beginning of a different movie, because they were supposed to have a crazy writer's room in this with all these big people, and it really did feel like just them spitballing, and they're like, okay, we're done, and they all went home and they had the script and they're like, alright, I think this franchise is a mistake. This movie is a mistake. I don't know why I thought I should still review this. I should have just let this one go. The only Transformer movies I've ever liked is the animated one, and all the others have never been as fun. I did like Transformers as a kid, and I hate these movies. And it's like, they don't like their source material, they don't clearly like filmmaking that much, and they don't like competent action sequences. I don't know what people get out of them. I don't get it, and I guess they say something about our current society, but every time I see one, I'm like, I don't want to know that part of our society. I want that locked away. If it was like a quick 90 minutes, I would love a good live-action Transformers movie at this point. Frankly, I think that's probably why I like the few little glimmers of hope in this so much, is because you're like, okay, maybe someone could do it, and I want Michael Bay gone from this thing. I've been hearing about how he's not going to make another one since like 2009. We have a decade of Michael Bay Transformers movies that all suck, that focus on humans, and then when they do focus on the Transformers are ugly, and then they always have an island of machinery in the sky that they fight in. Like, these are, oh god, when you watch these films you learn something about yourself and how you fit into society, and how maybe society has rejected you because they are able to accept something like Transformers for this long, and maybe they won't accept you as much as they'll accept a shitty Michael Bay movie, and how depressing that is the world that I have to live in. But overall, I think this movie was, you know, not as bad as usual. Seeing the depths of humanity and still being there, ready for more. But I can't really disagree or argue too much, because I've been there to bear witness to humanity's greatest fallacy, like the fragility of life. The Transformers movies go on, and we're just there to bear witness to them. So if you have seen Transformers The Last Night and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.